What's going on, everybody? I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker. I hope you guys had an incredible weekend. I appreciate you guys all for tuning in today on this Monday. Now, let me start off this show by saying this. There are some times where you come on the air and there's not a lot of stuff to talk about. That is not the case today. We had a loaded weekend of boxing fights, all of which will be broken down momentarily. And then not only were the fights something to talk about, we've got a lot of news to get into. Obviously, starting off with the biggest news, Keyshawn Davis and everything that happened to the Davis brothers over the duration of this weekend. So lots of stuff to get into. Now, for those of you that are tuning in for the Joseph Ward interview, that interview may or may not still occur. I'm not exactly sure 100% what's going on. He's running a little bit behind right now. So if he's able to join on the show today, I'll add him in. If not, we'll be postponing that interview to another time. That being said, though, it's time to get into today's show. And just to give you guys a quick preview, for those of you that are tuning in, I'll start off with fight recaps for this weekend. Go through all the fights that happened this weekend, give my thoughts on those. And then I'm going to transition into some boxing news, which will obviously, the biggest news is in regards to Keyshawn Davis. I'll be giving you guys my thoughts on everything that's happened since Friday's weigh-in, and then we'll go from there at that point in time. But those of you that are new tuning into today's show, if you guys have any comments, discussion points, or want to say anything about me on the show, make sure to leave that in the comment section. I will address that after each and every single segment so we can kind of go back and forth on there. So make sure to leave your comments in the chat right now so I can make sure to address those as we go out the duration of today's show. Let's get into the fight recap from this weekend because as I said, lots of big-time fights. When you have Junto Nakatani, Opetaia fighting, you have the likes of Wardley in a massive heavyweight fight going down in the UK, so on and so forth. There's lots to get into. Let's get into it, though. We're going to go in order of how the events went down this weekend, starting off with Callum Simpson versus Ivan Zuko for the European Super Middleweight title. Simpson won the vacant European Super Middleweight title with a 10th round KO over Zuko. And I want to break this down. First and foremost in this fight, when you look at Callum Simpson, there are mixed opinions, I feel like, when you look at him as a fighter. Personally, I like Callum Simpson. I genuinely do believe that he has a chance. I don't know if he's going to become a world champion, but I do believe that he has a chance to be a big-time player on the domestic scene. And when you look at Callum Simpson, I feel like his mistakes that he makes are very easy to correct. He has skill, and he certainly does have power. His aggression is very entertaining to watch as well. However, I personally do view that the biggest thing hindering Callum Simpson from success is that he is too aggressive, which is a little bit wild to say in today's world of boxing. When we have so many fighters going out there and not wanting to lay it all out on the lines, he does not want. He's not anywhere near that branch of the tree. Callum Simpson goes out there and is way too aggressive, in my own personal opinion, to the extent where that caused him to get knocked down twice. I don't think either one of the two knockdowns that Zuko had in that fight were massive damage to Callum Simpson, but I feel like it was more so due to the fact that Callum Simpson rushed in too aggressively and he got caught. And I feel like that's going to hinder Callum Simpson when he's working his way up, fighting more and more high-level fighters, that when he goes in as too aggressive in his fights, it will go and end up hurting him against those big, heavy hitters. Now, I did say in the preview that Zuko is a heavy hitter. He has a lot of KOs in his resume. He is the guy that has that ability to knock you out. So he was able to withstand that, which was interesting to see. But just for Callum Simpson, I feel like the issues in his game, the flaws, the holes in his boxing game are easy to be corrected. All he has to do is just work on not being so aggressive and improve the ring IQ. If those two things can be improved upon, Callum Simpson has a chance to make a lot of noise on the domestic scene and maybe even make some world nation news. But I feel like, I don't think he's going to be a world champion in the future, but I feel like he's going to be a top contender, somebody that could maybe fight for a world title, maybe two in his life, but also be a guy that's going to be a big player on the domestic scene. So what is next for Callum Simpson? Here's the problem. I'm going to break down the undercard very shortly, but there was somebody just underneath him on the undercard that was supposed to be the guy that would go and fight him next. It should have happened in this fight, in my opinion. The promotion decided to go do that little thing that we saw happen 2 weeks ago with the Caleb Plant, Jamal Charlo situation, and they did not make the fight happen right away. Who am I alluding to? Mark Jeffers. Mark Jeffers was upset by Sean Hemphill in the co-main event. That in and of itself was an interesting fight I'm going to break down momentarily, but Mark Jeffers versus Callum Simpson was the fight to make. Both guys are ranked neck and neck with each other in the top 10 of the middleweight rankings. I believe it's for the IBO, but I'm not 100% positive on that one. WBC, my apologies. But they're both ranked within the top 10 of a couple of different organizing bodies. That was the fight to make. In my opinion, if they were smart, boxers should have had that fight be the fight that was happening on Saturday. Unfortunately, They're not doing that. And therefore, you have a situation where Mark Jeffers got upset. Is that the fight to make? I still think it is. But I understand why it's not. And the bad news is that the hype for that fight has now been buzzed a lot. So that still is the fight that makes the most sense to me, in my opinion. Also, though, other guys for him to possibly fight, Luka Plantic makes a lot of sense. Eric Bazignan, Bruno Sarace. That could also be his fight that makes sense. Obviously, Bruno Sarace is the guy that pulled off the big upset against Jaime Munguia and then just recently lost to Jaime Munguia in the rematch, but Munguia was obviously on PED. So those are the fights I could see him fighting next. I think Callum Simpson would beat all the guys I just listed right there. However, those all make a lot of sense for his next fight. Let's go to the undercard. I'm just going to run through some of the other fights that were entertaining and that were noteworthy on the undercard. As I said earlier, Sean Hemphill, Mark Jeffers. Hemphill comes over from the United States of America and pulls off the massive upset, handing Mark Jeffers his very first loss in his career. The scorecards read 95-95, 97-93, 96-94, all in favor of Hemphill in that fight. He had an excellent performance. Jeffers had his moments, but overall, Hemphill deserved that win there. He had an incredible performance and pulled off the big upset. Rise Edwards also want to make sure I point him out. He had a good fight, won on points. The scorecards were all 78-74 in favor of Edwards. He's a rising featherweight. He had a great performance there as well. Let's head over to the fight that did happen momentarily, but as I said, I'm going to be going in order. So let's head over to another fight going down in the UK. Fabio Wardley, Justis Huni. That was the definition of an incredible heavyweight fight. Let's look at the situation there. Fabio Wardley had, and let me say this before I go any further. Fabio Wardley had one of the greatest comeback knockouts you will see in boxing. And this is what I love about boxing. There is no other sport in all the world where you can be down, getting blown out in a fight, or a performance, or a sport, whatever the case may be, any event, and in a moment's notice, you can come back and erase that entire deficit in one split second. We witnessed that happen once again in an incredible KO by Fabio Wardley. A KO that might just go down as the KO of the year this year. And I saw some stuff going on X. And it bothered me a little bit. A lot of people were talking about this KO that Fabio Wardley had and said this is very Deontay Wilder-like. And to that I say, absolutely that was a Deontay Wilder type knockout. Wilder was the guy that was never going to beat you on points. He was not a very skilled fighter whatsoever. But we knew he had one of the most powerful punches in all mankind history. And that punch that Deontay Wilder was capable of having allowed him to have one of the greatest knockout ratios in boxing history. And we witnessed a sign of that in Fabio Wardley when he fought on Saturday. And there were a lot of people going out there saying, okay, so we have the next Deontay Wilder. Well, first of all, I don't believe that Fabio Wardley will be as big as Deontay Wilder was in peak Deontay Wilder. We're talking about a guy that was a world champion for 5 years straight. We're talking about a guy that had some of the most devastating knockouts in boxing history. But to say that as a slander, that you're just Deontay Wilder, and I get where the people are coming from. Okay, Deontay Wilder was not a very skilled fighter. Is that the type of guy you want to become like? But listen, if you ask me, a guy that has a net worth of over $150 to $200 million, a man that accomplished some of the greatest feats in boxing history as a heavyweight, having some of the most iconic knockouts, a guy that had one of the most iconic trilogies that we've had in the recent memory between Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, a guy that was a world champion for 5 years, if you're going to tell a boxer that that's going to be his career, I think 99.99999% of boxers in the world would be A-okay with that record. And so if you're going to tell me that Fabio Wardley is the next Deontay Wilder, I don't think that's really a shot at him at all. And so I really don't know where that stigma came from. But let's go back into this fight. Because there's two things I really want to point out here. First and foremost, I said on Friday's show, for Justis Huni, the biggest question mark for him was going to be this right here in that chin. If it gets tapped, it was something that could lead to him being knocked lights out. We have seen it before against lesser opponents with nowhere near the power that Fabio Wardley possesses. And he got stunned and or hurt many times throughout his career. And I said, when you fight a guy like Fabio Wardley, with the power of Fabio Wardley, who in his last performance put a dent in the head of Fraser Clark, that's not the guy that you want to step in a ring with and say, you know what, if I'm going to take a hit, that's not the guy you want to get hit by if you're Justis Huni. And we witnessed that. On the very end of round one, you could tell that Justis Huni got buzzed. Nothing severe, and it was not a very clean shot, but he got stunned. And he headed into the corner at the end of round one, and he was able to regather himself. But for the remainder of that fight up until the KO, Justice Hooney fought a brilliant fight to the point that I would even say this. He was putting on a masterclass against Fabio Wardley. He was debatably up in almost all rounds. I had Fabio Wardley winning one round. I think it was round 2, if I'm not mistaken. But even that round was very questionable. Justice Hooney was putting on a masterclass until that moment hit when Fabio Wardley stunned him, knocked him out. And for the other people that want to make the whole debate around the 10 count, listen to this. Anybody that's seen the video, it was a proper 10 count. Was it quicker than a lot of referees typically give for the 10 count? Absolutely. And when you look back in recent memory, obviously the Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fight, that was closer to 18 seconds. That is obviously a lot longer time span that he was given on the ground to recover as opposed to Justice Hooney. But at the end of the day, it was still 10 seconds from the time he hit the ground to the time that the ref called the fight. And at that point in time, the only answer is that it was counted as a proper knockout. That should end the debate right then and there. There's no point in continuing this debate, and the fact that Justice Hooney's camp is going to go out there and try to go launch an official protest over the referee's count is not going to be successful, and I don't see any point in doing so. Now, going back to Justice Hooney. This is a man that I think has the capabilities of being an excellent fighter throughout his career. But if his chin is made of glass to the extent in which we have witnessed, it's going to hinder him at the heavyweight division especially drastically. When you get buzzed that quickly, that easily, and you're able to get stunned by Fabio Wardley in the way that you got devastatingly knocked out, it's a bad case of a recipe to make for the heavyweight division. And it's unfortunate because he is a very skilled fighter. And I even talked about that on Friday's show. Justice Hooney is a much more skilled fighter than Fabio Wardley. Now, I do think that Fabio Wardley was a little bit off his game on Saturday. I think he looked a lot worse in terms of his skill than he is. But still, Hooney was going to run laps around him regardless when it talks about ring IQ, boxing skills, so on and so forth. The biggest hindrance, and it can't be your biggest weakness. If your biggest weakness at the heavyweight division is having a glass chin, you're going to be in for a world of trouble. And we witnessed that on Saturday's fight. Hooney was going to cruise through the upset against Fabio Wardley in Fabio Wardley's home. And that glass chin led to that massive knockout. And so what do you look at for Justice Hooney moving forward? This is a guy, like I said, if his chin can hold up, he can accomplish a lot of things at the heavyweight division. But that is a massive, all uppercase if for Justice Hooney. And so what could possibly be next for Justice Hooney? Well, when you look at his resume now, he has positioned himself where he has a big enough name that there's no point in just doing a little no-name fight for him moving forward. He has officially proven that he is a guy that can compete with the top 15 guys at the heavyweight division. And so some guys I'll just throw out there that would make sense, that are big money-making fights. Now, obviously, these will vary from guy to guy in terms of what's big, but still, all fights that would make a decent amount of money and would also prove himself to be able to go out there and make another step-up fight. Here's the names I came up with. 2 American young heavyweights, Jared Anderson, Richard Torres Jr. Both of those fights are intriguing to me. Now, listen to those 2 guys. I do think Jared Anderson and Richard Torres Jr. is the fight to make, but still, both guys would make sense for Hooney. Hrgovic could make sense. Andy Ruiz, Frank Sanchez, Lawrence Okoli, Dave Allen. All of those fights would make a lot of sense. I feel like for the UK fan base, and I respect the UK fan base so much when we talk about boxing out there, if you go out there and you have a good performance, a respectable performance, you are an upstanding type of guy, the UK fan base will embrace you. I feel like it's very similar out there in Japan as well, but since we're talking about the UK fan base, if you are in the UK, the fans will rally behind you and you can create a market for yourself in the UK if you go out there as a respectable man and you can go out there and take a defeat or perform nicely, you're going to earn the respect of the UK fans. And that's why I think a fight against a guy like Dave Allen or Lawrence Okoli, those type of fights would make sense. I think they would welcome him with open arms in the UK, and he could go out there and have another big fight against one of those type of guys. So Justice Hooney, I don't think his career is over. We're going to see him come back again, but it's just going to be the bigger question mark. Can he withstand not getting hit? Because if he gets hit by a power puncher, it's going to be lights out for Justice Hooney. He has a glass chin. Let's head over now to the man that I want to wrap up this portion of the fight about, and that's Fabio Wardley. I just want to give all props to him in this performance. As I said, I think something was off that night for him. I don't think he was performing to the top of his ability. And that's not an excuse. It's just a sense of saying, you know what? He was able to battle through something not being right that night to still perform a massive KO in that fight to come out victorious. Bobby Wardley has had one of the most remarkable stories in all of heavyweight boxing, in all boxing right now. Where he was started at to where he's at today is an incredible testament to who he is as a person. And so just to begin with, Bobby Wardley is an upstanding guy, and it's easy to root for a guy like that. And then when you talk about him in the ring, he is a warrior in that ring. And his power, what he brings to that ring, makes for exciting fights at all times. We were all waiting for it. We knew that the only way he was going to win that fight was by KO. And when he went out there and landed that, it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. As I said, very likely that could go down as the knockout of the year. What's next for Fabio Wardley? There's a lot of fights you could make. The big thing with the heavyweight division is that the heavyweight division is tied up with what happens on July 19th. You have a fight with Usyk and Dubois. If Usyk wins that fight, you know Usyk will not be fighting for at least 6 more months. And that fight that he has will likely be the final fight of his career. Who will he fight in that fight? We do not know yet. A lot of rumors have pointed to the fact that he could possibly go out there and fight a trilogy with the winner of Fight Fury and Anthony Joshua later this year. That could be the final fight for Usyk. And if that is the case, the heavyweight belts will be tied up for quite some time. If Dubois wins that fight, obviously the fights will get moving. He'll probably return to the ring very shortly. And I'm sure we'll have Joseph Parker fighting him in the near future. So a lot of things hinge on what happens July 19th. But for Fabio Wardley, he is now the interim champion at for the WBA. He has the opportunity to do one of two things. He could either go out there and wait out for the winner of Dubois and Usyk, and likely then Dubois, and if Dubois wins, obviously it could then be Joseph Parker. But if that fight goes where Usyk wins it and Usyk does not want to fight Joseph Parker, you could very likely see a massive heavyweight fight between two interim champions in Fabio Wardley and Joseph Parker. For myself personally, I think both guys deserve a world title chance. And if it wasn't for having an all-time great and Usyk hold his belts right now, you would see that fight happen. However, because we're in a weird situation right now, Fabio Wardley and Joseph Parker could be a massive fight to make, maybe even for the co-main event. Eventually, for another fight, if you have the Anthony Joshua Tyson Fury, something along those lines, you could see them fighting there. But that is obviously a main event worthy fight as well. Other fights you could see him go after and pursue could be something that he talked about a few weeks ago. Deontay Wilder. If Wilder has a massive performance in a couple of weekends, that would be a big money fight for Fabio Wardley. Chisora. He pointed out that it's a fight he'd be interested in. That would be a huge domestic fight to make as well. Michael Hunter could also be on the table. Now, like I said, all these only hinge on the fact of what happens July 19th. I don't think we're going to have any more heavyweight decisions be made public up until the results come out of July 19th. So right now we can talk about what fights we want to see. All those are entertaining, but the biggest thing hinges on the fact of what happens July 19th. Once we find those results and we see what happens in that fight, the heavyweight division should be able to get moving again. So all hinges on that point in time. Other fights that happen on the undercard for Fabio Wardley, Justice Hooney, Pierce O'Leary, he defeats Liam DeLeon. He fought a good performance there. I think Pierce O'Leary is a solid fighter at super lightweight. Someone to keep your eyes on. I think he did not perform to the best of his ability, but he still did win that fight quite easily. Lewis Richardson made his pro debut in a 60-54 cards across the board. He looked solid. I was not too high on the performance overall in terms of, okay, this is a guy that I could see as a future world champion or even a domestic champion, but it was a good performance nonetheless, someone to keep an eye on as a prospect. It was just his first fight of his career. Mike Perez, Stephen Ward, a cruiserweight fight. Perez won on the 9th round by TKO. He had a great performance there as well. Heading over to the heavyweight division, Nelson Haya, 2nd round, TKO. He is a guy that's now in the top 15 of a couple of different organizing bodies. Someone to keep an eye on for the heavyweight division there. Then, the most interesting fight that happened there, it wasn't an upset because it was a draw, but the Sam Gilley versus Gideon fight. That fight was interesting. 76-76 draw. Sam Gilley was the guy that was supposed to go out there and win that fight. This was an easy layup victory for him. There's no excuse for him not performing solid in that fight. He should have easily gotten that win, and it ends up being a draw. That's a major fork in the road for him now because that was not the performance to set himself up for the fights that he was looking for at super welterweight. So we'll see where he goes from there. Let's head over now to the top rank card that happened then on Saturday night in the USA. We know the Keyshawn Davis situation. That's something that will be addressed momentarily. Everything surrounding Keyshawn Davis and the Davis brothers, outside of what I'm going to talk about with the fights, I will discuss that after this segment when we get into the Keyshawn Davis portion. Right now, we're just recapping the guys that actually decided to show up and fight on Saturday night. So, the main event was replaced from Keyshawn Davis, Edwin De Los Santos to Abdullah Mason, Jeremiah Nakatani. This was a fight that went exactly according to plan. And guess what? This was the first of many events that Abdullah Mason will headline in his career. Abdullah Mason went out there and took care of business. All for the past 6 or 7, 8 months, there have been 2 prospects in boxing in which I have set my eyes on and said, you know what? These are the 2 guys that are going to be the future faces of boxing. There could be others, but the 2 guys that I'm confident in saying that is Abdullah Mason and Mosi Toma. And I go back and forth. Which of these 2 guys are the top prospects to watch in boxing right now? You could give either one. I feel like right now it's 1A, 1B. If I were to have to pick one of them, I would go Mosi Toma. But like I said, this is neck and neck. It's really, now that guys are ever going to face each other, pound for pound ranking is the only place this will ever be a debate. But both these guys are the future of boxing. And Abdullah Mason went out there and proved that. No, it was not against a guy that was a top-ranked fighter. But this was a guy that, listen, when I look at evaluating a champion, we know the skill set is there. We know his ability is there. The biggest thing to look for, what I want to see from as a young fighter, is what's he like up here. We just witnessed that one guy that was a former world champion at that division that was supposed to headline is not all right up here. And so many boxers, their fights and their careers are hindered from what's going on upstairs. And when you talk about a calm, cool, collected, a guy that is so composed in that ring and outside the ring, is an upstanding guy, that is Abdullah Mason. He is the full package. When you talk about everything that comes with being a future face of American boxing and possibly even boxing as a whole, you have to evaluate all of those components. Is he a guy that can get the job done in the ring? Is he entertaining? Is he skilled? And can he control himself in a right way from a publicity standpoint, from a mentality standpoint? And the answer to all those things have so far been checked, yes, for Abdullah Mason. And that is why I'm confident saying that this is a generational fighter. This is the guy that when we look at this next generation of boxing, he, I believe, can be that guy for not only American boxing, but all of boxing as a whole over the duration of the next 10, 15 years. He is a special talent. He went out there, got the 5th round TKO, and obviously this was something that he had to cut. For Nakatani, he was obviously not doing well in the corner. He wanted to stop that fight. The doctor said, yes, you're not going to go out there and return to the ring. End of business. He took care of his job that night. So, what's next for Abdullah Mason? There's only one answer right now. Somebody lost a fight on the scale, lost his belt on the scales on Friday. We already knew this was going to be an opportunity, and Abdullah Mason went out there, took care of business, and has rightfully positioned himself to deserve a shot for the WBO World Championship now. That fight should be able to happen not too in the far distant future, because Abdullah Mason did not take much damage in that fight. Who would that fight possibly be against? That's the big question. We have had the WBO come out now over the past few hours and discuss the options on the table. Abdullah Mason is not guaranteed a chance at that fight, but it's very likely, I believe, because top rank in the WBO are like this. So do not be surprised to see him get a shot at the World Championship, and I believe he deserves it. In a perfect world, Abdullah Mason versus Sam Noakes is the fight to make. Whether that fight be in the USA or the UK, I'm A-okay with either one of those. I think both would be big fights to make. That should be for the WBO World Championship. In a perfect world, that's the fight to make. If Sam Noakes is not available, you have other guys that are inside the top 5, which include Gabriel Flores Jr., Christopher Muafu, and Javier Herrera. All those would be interesting fights. Javier Herrera is a guy that I'm very excited about. I think he's a very intriguing prospect, but I do not think he is ready yet for a World Championship shot. I think he's a fight or 2 away. And so, like I said, when you look at those names, those are the 5 names that are possible to make for a World Championship shot for the WBO. Abdullah Mason, Sam Noakes is far and away the most entertaining, most exciting, and it would be the most anticipated fight to make. Also the best fight while I'm at that. So that should be the fight to make have happen. If there's any other fight, we'll see what happens there. But I believe Abdullah Mason, Sam Noakes for the vacant WBO World Championship is the fight to make, probably in the middle of the fall. That would be the most ideal situation. I think that would be the case we're going to see have happen there. Other fights on the top ranked card were interesting. Obviously, the co-main event. Once again, I'm not going to discuss what happened outside of the ring, but let's go to this. Nahir Albright versus Kelvin Davis. Super lightweight fight. I was already surprised when I talked about this fight on Friday that before everything happened and we knew who was going to be the new main event, co-main event, that Kelvin Davis was way too high up on that card, in my opinion. Kelvin Davis has been a guy that is a He's a good fighter when you talk about boxing as a whole. Is he a guy that's a contender? Absolutely not. Obviously, nowhere near world championship caliber. Probably not even a guy that should ever deserve to be anywhere near the top 15 of any organizing bodies. So when you threw his name up there to be the co-main event, I was a little bit shocked. And even at that point in time, he was third from the main event. That was even a little bit shocking to myself. When you have the likes of a Tiger Johnson, Troy Isley, those type of guys fighting on the undercard, those would have been bigger names and more talented fighters to have as the co-main event. But it is what it is. That still ended up being a good fight. Not for the way that Top Rank was expecting it to be, but it was a good fight nonetheless. So major shout out to Nahir Albright. As I said, I will discuss what happened outside of that ring in the Keyshawn Davis segment I planned after the fight recaps. But Nahir Albright went out there and performed a massive upset on Kelvin Davis not from his technical skill. If you were to talk about who was going to win that fight from a boxing standpoint, it's not that shocking. But the way it was being promoted, Kelvin Davis was the Davis brother. Obviously, this was the big Davis homecoming, so on and so forth. Massive upset here. The scorecards, 97-93, 96-94, 95-95, all in favor of Nahir Albright on that fight. Let me say one thing really quickly. What the heck was up with that 95-95 scorecard? Once again, every weekend I come on the show on Monday, and at least one fight I have to look at and say, what the heck happened on the scorecard? Thankfully, they did not rob Nahir Albright of his great opportunity and moment. But you can make a very good case that Nahir Albright won just about every single round of that fight. And then you also have to throw in the fact that he also dropped Kelvin Davis. But in this fight, 95-95 is an outrageous scorecard. Absolutely outrageous. How is that even a possible scorecard you have there? In what world did they win an equal amount of rounds? Once again, that judge needs to be investigated because that is ridiculous. The 97-93, 96-94 scorecards were a little bit more reasonable, but still, even 96-94 to me is a little bit outlandish. That was a fight that Nahir Albright clearly won. It should not have even been a debate. So major shout out to Nahir Albright. He actually will be coming on the show next week, so I'll announce that when it actually happens. But major shout out to Nahir Albright. He had a great performance in that fight, pulled off the upset, and took care of business out there. Let's go to the other fight. Tiger Johnson fought another fight out there. He won the scorecards 190, 97-93, 98-92 in that scorecard, all favoring Tiger Johnson. It was a disappointing performance for me when I looked at Tiger Johnson. I like Tiger Johnson. I feel like he's an intriguing prospect. At the same breath, he's got to work on himself in terms of his ability to listen to his coaches. One thing that I do not like about Top Rank broadcasts is that they oftentimes have the coaches and what they're saying to the fighters on the screen. I would prefer just to watch the fight and evaluate it myself. But from this standpoint, what we did witness in the Tiger Johnson fight is that for some reason, Tiger Johnson did not want to listen to his coach. And I feel like if he were to listen, and whether that is a pride issue, that is a self-confidence issue, whatever it is, he's got to fix that and learn to listen to his corner. Because as he fights better and better fighters, he's going to get himself in trouble if he's not listening to his corner. And he is a skilled fighter, but too often he has these performances that are either just duds or performances that are great. And I feel like this inconsistency is going to hurt him going forward. So he's a guy to keep an eye on, but still, a disappointing performance in my opinion, even though he got the win in that fight. Troy Isley, another guy. He had scorecards of 98-92, 96-94, 96-94, all in favor of Isley. I had him winning that fight just barely. I think the 96-94 scorecards are accurate. The 98-92 was way too wide in my opinion there, but he still won that fight. And here's the thing about Troy Isley. A lot of fans are not going to be entertained by him. That's not what he brings to the table when he fights and steps in that ring. He is a skilled fighter, but I feel like if he were to engage more, it would open the door for a lot more entertainment, but also a lot more dominant victories for himself. I feel like he holds back way too much. He does not just go put the pressure on right out the gate, and it ends up making him get into situations later on in the fight that he has to carve out those wins in those rounds. And it obviously comes from the Shakur Stevenson playbook. We see a lot of different things, but Troy Isley is going to have to work on some things because he's not as defensively elite as Shakur Stevenson is. He's still talented, but that is not going to work if he wants to go step in the ring with guys like Carlos Adames, Janovec, the likes of those guys that he's called out before, even when he came on the show and called those guys out. That's not going to work against those type of guys. He has to work on himself being a little bit more aggressive, open up a little bit more. Other fights on that card, Keon Davis, he did take care of business in his fight. The only Davis brother that took care of business in the ring. He had a great second round KO, devastating liver shot, absolutely brutal shot there. Made the guy go crawl into this corner and KOing him. Also, Scooter Davis, he went out there and had a great second round KO as well to a body shot. That was a performance that was incredible. And let me say this about Scooter Davis real quickly. He deserves a lot more credit. Anybody that has not watched him yet needs to get their eyes on him because he is box office entertainment. He is another one of the most exciting. He's one of the most exciting prospects in boxing, in my opinion. He always puts on a show. 7 fights, 7 KOs. Every time he steps up on a performance, he gets a devastating KO. He needs to be signed by a major promotional company and start working his way up in that promotional company. I would not be shocked to see a Top Rank, a Matchroom, somebody go after him in the near future. I think he's ready for that opportunity. Then let's head over to what happened in the early mornings of Sunday morning. I was up at 3:30 my time when it went down. Junta Nakatani, Ryoshi Nishida, the WBC IBF Unified Bantamweight title fight. I told you guys to wake up for that fight. It did not become the fight of the year that I said I had a chance of becoming, but the reason it did not become the fight of the year is because we witnessed a masterclass by Junta Nakatani. Junta Nakatani proved Sunday morning why he is one of the top 10 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. And he already was that for myself, but he worked his way up to the point where I'm willing to say that he's either 6, 7, or 8. You talk about a guy that is extremely skilled in Nishida. And in that fight, he puts a beating on Nishida. Now, I will say round 1 was very exciting. I gave that round to Nishida. It could have went either way, but that was one of the best rounds of boxing you can go see. If you have not seen that round yet, go pull it up. I think actually I have it posted on my X account. That round 1 was phenomenal. One of the best rounds of boxing you'll see this year in all of boxing. But Junta Nakatani laid the hammer on Nishida throughout the remainder of that fight. And he showed that not only does he have devastating knockout power, but he is an elite fighter as well. And in that fight, he ends up getting to the point where they had to stop the fight. And Nishida's eye was literally, you could not see out of it. He had a hematoma going on his face, on his head. He was beat up badly after just 5 rounds. They have stopped the fight, and we move on after that point in time. And I don't think this is the end of Nishida. He will be back. We've seen him dominate fights time and time again. He is an incredible fighter. He's a world champion. He will be back. But there is levels to this thing in boxing. And Junta Nakatani is one of those elite pound-for-pound fighters. And he's now set himself up for a position where it's now been announced he's likely going to relinquish his belts in the coming days. Probably by the end of the month, the report came out. He will vacate his WBC and IBF Unified Bantamweight titles and move up to 122. Obviously, this will set up the fight for Naoya Inoue. That's going to be the biggest fight to make in boxing outside of Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua as the biggest, but probably the best fight they can make in boxing. That will be a massive fight to make, and that seems to be on the table at this point in time. I will preview probably tomorrow what I think will happen in that fight, but just to say this right now, that is a massive fight. And Junta Nakatani definitely turned my eyes a little bit there and said, all right, this guy is ready to make that next jump. I'd like to see him get a fight or two under his belt first, but still, he is one of those elite fighters in boxing today. Let's head over to the co-main event because I was very intrigued by this as well. Tenshin Nasuwaka, he went and fought Victor Santillan for a bantamweight fight. Nasuwaka won by unanimous decision, going by 190 on one scorecard, 99-91 on the other two. This was by far his most complete performance. He is a guy that was a former kickboxing star, made the transition to boxing. And those of you that have watched him over the duration of his career so far, every single fight, this man improves. He is a fun fighter to watch. But the way that he's improved every single fight is impressive. And my personal opinion is this. I think we're going to see him fight for a world title by the end of this year or early 2026. And my guess is that he's going to be emerging victorious from that fight. He is a guy that will be a world champion, a very fun fighter to watch, and a very talented fighter as well. Other two fighters on that card that were all bantamweight fights, you had Van Tran. He won by 98-92 to 100, and then 190-190 on the two scorecards. Great performance there. Riku Masuwada, he had a great performance as well with a devastating, one of the craziest knockouts you will see this year, a first-round KO to make a statement. He put the bantamweight division on notice as well. He should be a future contender for a world championship as well. Then, the final fight card, I'm going to break it down now, happened out in Australia. Thank goodness this card lined up perfectly with what all went down with Japan, because right when Japan was done, it trickled right into the main event for Australia fight between Jai Opetaia and Claudia Squeo. Okay, I said this on Friday's show, and I knew this was going to happen. I said, Claudio, you're going to get your lights turned off real quickly in this fight. His lights didn't go out, but he left with a broken jaw. And when you look at this fight, let me just say this very clearly. This fight should never have happened. And I understand the fact of this. Jai Opetaia does not have many options on the table right now. He wants to become undisputed, and he will become undisputed if given the opportunity. He is far and away the best fighter at cruiserweight, in my opinion. Yes, I said that. Zurdo is very, very good. He's a top 20 boxer, in my opinion, as well, for Zurdo. But Jai Opetaia is the best cruiserweight and would beat Zurdo in a fight, in my personal opinion. And obviously, they both would destroy Amadou Jack or whoever you're going to get into this world champion there when they do the rematch. But that's beside the point. Jai Opetaia has been screwed over and over again, whether that be because of mandatory fights or that be because Zurdo's not fighting him right now. We need the unification to fight to happen. And Claudio Escuello, all due respect, congratulations for stepping up in that ring and fighting Jai Opetaia. Not a lot of people would do that. But he had no business being in that ring. The man looked like he was a weight class or two beneath Jai Opetaia. And he weighed 18 pounds less than Jai Opetaia did just in the weigh-in itself. Jai Opetaia looked massive compared to him. Claudio Escuello there was not a single thing that Claudio Escuello could even compete with Jai Opetaia on. Whether that be power, that be skill, that be length, that be athleticism, it was a massive mismatch. And honestly, it was a devastating fight that fight should never have happened to begin with. And I think that was just a waste of time for everybody involved. Jai Opetaia didn't take any damage. I don't think he got any better in that fight either. He had another great knockout, got the KO. Claudio Escuello, you're leaving with a broken jaw. The fight never should have been made, in my opinion. So what has to happen next? What I just said. Jai Opetaia is the best cruiserweight, and it's time for him to be able to go out there and prove that. We need the fight. Zurdo will be fighting Jake Paul, on the Jake Paul undercard. He'll be fighting. When that fight is done, we need Oscar De La Hoya and we need Eddie Hearn to get together and make that fight happen for later this year. If you need to get Turkey involved or whatever needs to happen, get that fight made. It needs to happen. There's no better fight to make at the cruiserweight division, and in my opinion, it's one of the best fights to make in boxing as well. We need Jai Opetaia versus Zurdo to happen ASAP. And if for some reason that fight cannot come to fruition, Jai Opetaia needs to go out there and fight the winner of Badou Jack or No Mickey Malian when they have the rematch. Or at least go fight a guy like CBS. Go fight another top contender in the cruiserweight division so at least it can be interesting. Jai Opetaia would destroy everybody in that division, but we need to see better fights be made. Because a guy like Claudio Escuello is just embarrassing to even have him step in the ring with a guy like Jai Opetaia. They have no business sharing the ring together. On the undercard, you had Connor Wallace make his return against Dylan Collin. He had a good performance there. It was close fight on point, 77-75 on two of them, 78-74 the other, all in favor of Wallace. It was a solid performance, not a statement whatsoever, but a decent performance. Tyler Blizzard versus Rocky Ogun, an incredible performance. 99-91 on two of the scorecards, 98-92 on the other one. He's an extremely interesting prospect, someone to keep your eyes on. But here's who really stole the show for me as a prospect on the undercard there. Max McIntyre. He had a 6-round KO against Ricardo Warren. This is a man that's only 20 years old, 8-0 now at this point in his career. Keep an eye on him. He could be the next big thing coming out of Australian boxing. He is a very good fighter. I think he's going to be someone that we're going to see a lot more of in the near future. One more fight card I'm going to get into. Going back to Saturday, I guess my notes were a little bit out of order here. Pro Box TV card. Obviously, Justin Paldo was supposed to be the main event. Unfortunately, he neither could make weight on Friday, and therefore he had to get removed from the main event. So we ended up having Michael Angeletti. He had a good performance in this fight as well. 99-91 on all three scorecards. Dominant performance. He'll be coming on the show to break down that fight in 2 weeks from today on that Monday, the 23rd. But Michael Angeletti, incredible performance by him. He looked sensational and continues to work his way up to become a possible world title contender in the near future. The co-main event, Emiliano Moreno versus Eric Bonet. Moreno had a great performance. He made a statement that night. 6-round KO. In that fight, I was a corner stoppage, I should say to be more specific. But he broke down Bonet in that fight. Great performance. He is somebody to keep an eye on. A very intriguing young prospect. And for those of you that do not know him, you guys can go check out the interview I did with him 2 weeks ago. But he's trained in the beginning portion of his career with David Benavidez a lot. And you can see a lot of similarities in him that have ties to David Benavidez. There's a lot of things that look very similar to him. Not all of it, but there's a lot of influence from David Benavidez in his ability to fight and the way he takes that. So he's the guy to keep an eye on as well. Great performance from him. With that being said, that wraps up our busy weekend of boxing that happened over the past weekend. I'm going to go on a break, and I'm going to get into some boxing news. Obviously, that will be headlined by the Keyshawn Davis and the Davis brothers situation. So stay tuned. I will see you guys in about 3 to 4 minutes. I'll be right back. Have fun. I'll see you guys shortly. God bless you guys. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the SchuZ Show. I'm your host, SchuZ Shoemaker. So, I just got off the phone with Joseph Ward, who's obviously supposed to be on the show today, and we got some clarification on what's going on. So, his fight card has now been rescheduled for when he was supposed to fight. He was going to be appearing on a fight in a couple of weekends, but there's been an issue, and the promotion has now changed the location of the fight, and so a lot of things are up in the balance for when he's going to be fighting and where he's going to be fighting at. So, we're going to have him back on the show in the very near future. Once he has clarity on his fight situation, he'll be hopping back on the show. We'll get that interview in there. So just to make sure everybody knows, there will not be a Joe Ward interview happening on today's show. So that will happen in the near future, though. As for some of the comments in the section, let's get right to it. Adam, you said De Los Santos would have beaten Keyshawn. He's got the fastest hands in boxing and a huge power puncher. And huge power. He's a great counter puncher, too. You know, a lot of those things you say are not inaccurate. But I will say this. I don't think Keyshawn would have lost to Edwin De Los Santos. And I say this in a couple of ways. Obviously, it didn't happen, and who knows what's going to happen moving forward. But we have to remember, Edwin De Los Santos was likely not going to be the same exact fighter that we most recently saw in the likes of the Shakur Stevenson fight and other things along those lines. And the reason for that is that Edwin De Los Santos has not fought in a fight for over 18 months now. And it wasn't just 18 months of inactivity. It was 18 months of trying to survive. He had massive blood clot issues where he ballooned up in weight, and he was trying to deal with massive health scares where he didn't even know if he's going to return to boxing. And so this fight, when it was created, was kind of set up for a massive statement win by Keyshawn Davis. That's why they had it at home. This was all supposed to be about Keyshawn Davis. And I don't think that Keyshawn would have lost this fight, but at the same time, looking at it from hindsight, from the factor of the mental state, wherever Keyshawn was mentally, I don't know if he would have. That could have been the only issue with him in that ring. But I still do believe that if the fight would have happened, Keyshawn would have beat Edwin De Los Santos. That's just my personal opinion on that one. Speaking of this, though, it's time to get into something, folks. Keyshawn Davis and the Davis brothers. I talked on Friday of how disappointing his weigh-in was. Once again, the weigh-in was not the problem for me all the way. It was a problem, but the weigh-in itself was not the biggest issue for me with the Keyshawn Davis situation. The biggest issue for me was how he handled the weigh-in situation. We saw a guy in Chris Eubank Jr. miss weight about a month and a half ago. But in that situation, Chris Eubank Jr. gave it everything he had, and that's why people are still on his side. Keyshawn Davis clearly did not do that. And that's why he was up to dancing, singing, and having fun up on that stage. That was my problem. Long haul behold, I had no idea what was going to eventually unfold on this weekend after I got done with my live. What happened this weekend for the Davis family is embarrassing, disrespectful to boxing, and one of the most foolish things I have seen by a family, specifically a specific boxer, Keyshawn Davis, in a very long time. You could argue it was the most foolish 36-hour run by the Davis family, and especially Keyshawn Davis, that we have seen in boxing, and that is saying a lot. This was Keyshawn Davis's homecoming. This was a fight built entirely around Keyshawn Davis. The city of Norfolk, Virginia, had made this in the Keyshawn Davis week. They put it in law, made this his week to celebrate him. This was his big event. You had Michael Vick coming out to show. You had the mayor of Norfolk. You had all these different people coming out to show support to Keyshawn Davis. This was his moment to take the stardom. And when we were heading up into the week, all week long, the talk was about this. We are on the verge of a new budding superstar in not just American boxing, but boxing as a whole. That was the statement we were making as of last week. A week ago, this was what we were saying. Then Friday comes, and I said this. His career is not over by any stretch of the imagination, but you did just tarnish your record. You put a big stain in your record and your legacy because of the disgraceful weigh-in. And you have to factor in all the surrounding circumstances. There have been other missed weigh-ins, and that's not the problem. It is the fact of how he handled the situation when he missed weigh-in. By not trying, by dancing, having fun, and laughing up on that stage. That was the problem. And on top of that, this being his homecoming fight, so on and so forth. Those were the big problems with the weigh-in issue. So you lost your belt on the stage. You lost all these different aspects. That is that. At that point in time, that was embarrassing in and of itself. And then we fast forward into what happens inside of that ring. And that fight night. The night that you were supposed to be headlining. And let's just look at the past 36-hour run for what Keyshawn Davis had to go through. He laughs at missing weight when he didn't even try to make it. He lost his fight belt and his check on the stage. He watched his brother get whooped, and then he heads over and he ends up deciding to go jump Nahir and Albright in the locker room after their fight. And by the way, the guy who was trash talking all week long, Abdullah Mason, who is the next generational prospect that knows how to handle himself upstairs, he's a guy that goes out there and he headlines his own event. Oh, and by the way, in the midst of all this stuff going down, and I wasn't going to make this a big statement, by the way, I didn't even post this on my X account, but now that everything has come out, let's just go throw all this stuff out there. When you talk about going to your fight that you were supposed to be headlining, and you're in this place, an arena that they had to go out there and refund countless people, thousands of people for their tickets, and you're out there stuffing your mouth with popcorn over and over again on these videos, it's not a very good look. And I wasn't going to say anything at the point in time it happened because, listen, he has to move on with life, enjoy life, so on and so forth, sure. But there's a time and a place, and also you got to understand the context and what's going on at the moment. People are pissed off at you. And you are running around and having fun at the fight with stuff in your face with more food when you're already just overweight at your fight weigh-in. It was not a good look. And now that you put this whole picture together, this is one of the most embarrassing 36-hour runs in the history of boxing by any athlete. And that's saying a lot. You went from a future superstar to a man that is, his career is in the balance now. I was not saying that as of last week and when I talked to you guys on Friday after the weigh-in situation. But the way that he conducted himself this past weekend, he's turned a lot of people off. A lot of people are no longer fans or supporters, and might I even go a little bit further, a lot of people are now haters of Keyshawn Davis. And this stems from the fan base, his own city and community. You can go all the way up to top rank. They're not happy. I know for a fact ESPN ain't happy. There's a lot of people pissed off at this man right now. And if I'm going to go even a step further, I'm not sure how happy Bomac and Bud Crawford all are about his performance as well as their fellow stablemates. There's a disappointment that you saw in Bomac's face after the missed weight. And then you look at Bud Crawford and Bomac having to go into the Nahir Albright's locker room and apologize and talk to him. This is a bad look all around. And I'm not sure where Bomac and Bud Crawford guys stand with Keyshawn Davis in that group right now. But there is certainly issues that Keyshawn Davis is going to have to correct. And I'm not going to sit here right here and say that the nail's in the coffin, his career is over. But what I am confident in saying is that he's got a lot of work to do to repair himself and his image and his withstanding within the boxing community. And that's going to take time. And at the same time, this 36 hours might have just been 36 hours of bad mistakes. But this was 36 hours that's going to stay with him for the remainder of his career. Whether we like it or not, he can certainly overcome it. But these 36 hours, everything that he did, this is 36 hours that will stay with him as a stain on his legacy, on his name, until the end of his career. It was an embarrassment and it was a shame to see what he did this weekend. I will say this too. Kelvin Davis, he got whooped in that fight. It was embarrassing. But Kelvin Davis was not a part of any of the fights or altercations, apparently. So props to him for handling that loss appropriately. But what happened on a whole nother segment? What happened after that Nahir Albright Kelvin Davis fight in that locker room? And we don't have the full details yet. What we do know is that there appears to have been two fights. An original confrontation where Nahir Albright was involved and supposedly got stomped or whatever it was. And then there was a second altercation, which is now available on video to go watch. And I will say this. I don't know what happened backstage. I have no clue. What I do know is that you cannot be doing that as a boxer. Your job is to fight, and you have the opportunity to go fight within the bounds of a ring. You cannot be doing that outside of a ring. And you don't see this happen too often, but it is embarrassing to see in this situation. It never should have happened. And it would be interesting to see what possibly instigated the situation. But I will go to this point and say this. If you're Keyshawn Davis, after what happened on that Friday with the weigh-in, you should have been so highly aware of every move you made that weekend. That even down to the popcorn incidents, even up to different situations like that, you should have been so aware that you were in issues right now currently that you had to be aware of not going down anything else bad. Stay out of the news from bad publicity to the fullest extent on that Saturday. And he failed to do that in every sense of imagination possible. He should never have allowed himself to even be put in the position of even going near Albright in that locker room. And those things cannot be tolerated in boxing. This is a gruesome sport. And what 99% of the time we see have happened is a great deal of respect between two fighters that step in that ring. And what happens in that ring, you take care of business in that ring. Once that fight is over, it's time to move on. There's no reason. This was not a fight you were going to go out there and promote. You're not building up a fight. This was a guy that just got done fighting versus a guy that should have been fighting and a guy that fought early in the night. And Keyshawn Davis is the same thing. He's the guy that I think is talented, and I think he has a future in the sport. But doing that with your brother is irresponsible and ridiculous. And then you even go a step further, and we watch the video even deeper, and Keyshawn Davis' son is now involved in this. Listen, why are you even trying to get yourself in a fight when you have your son around and your family around? As a man, you need to protect your family and kids at all costs, not trying to go fight a guy for some beef you had for some reason. Everything about what Keyshawn Davis did this weekend was embarrassing. And they took what they built, took so long to build up. This long process of getting himself as a world champion, a future superstar in boxing, and his brother's also building up alongside him. You took all this time, all these years, all this work to build up something special. And what takes a long time to build up takes just like this to lose it all. And we witnessed that come to fruition this weekend. It's not over for Keyshawn Davis, but he's got a lot of building to do again. And I don't know how hard that building process is going to be for himself, but it's a long road back to reestablishing his name, image, branding, so on and so forth, relationships in his boxing career. Because what we witnessed was one of the worst 36 hours that a boxer has ever had. And that is saying something. Let's head into some other boxing news, folks. August 16th, Riyadh season card has now been announced. I've got some thoughts on this card, okay? I love Turki Al-Sheikh and what he brings to boxing. I've said that time and time again. The hate towards him is irresponsible. When we look at this card that got released for August 16th, though, it's a little bit baffling. And not the fights themselves, no, but the actual card order is a little bit baffling to me. And we have to remember, August 16th, this was the fight card that was supposed to be headlined by Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez until Tio ducked Devin Haney. Then we were going to have a couple other good fight cards, one of which was going to be Nick Ball versus Luis Nery. Would have been an excellent fight. Not quite the fight we're going to get now, though. Here's what we're going to have. The main event, Mosi Toma versus Dillian White. Listen, once again, Itoma, Abdullah Mason, two of the top prospects in all boxing, 1A, 1B. Both guys are phenomenal fighters. Both guys are incredible. Itoma now gets his first main event to headline on a massive card. So good news for him. The Dillian White matchup is something interesting. Now, I like and I see what Frank Warren's doing, but for true boxing fans, we know what he's doing, and I'm not a big fan of what he's doing. What he's doing is that Dillian White is a very recognizable name. And when you are Mosi Toma, getting a name like Dillian White on your resume is going to look quite well to the casual. For those of us that do know about Dillian White, we know that he's never been that good of a fighter to begin with. Secondly, he has not looked good at all since he's been off PEDs. Third, he is old and washed. This is going to be a night that Mosi Toma will officially send Dillian White into retirement. It is going to be a devastating KO, and it's going to be a rough end of a career for Dillian White. But he's being set up for failure in this fight against Mosi Toma. Not that this is a bad mistake. It's not the fight I wanted to see have happen, but it's not the fight that I'm shocked to see have happen either. But what I will say is this. I don't know why it's the main event. When you have the fights I'm going to talk about very shortly, Itoma Dillian White is not the main event for this fight card. I don't believe it should be that. I think it should be second or third up, but it's main event. Chief support for this fight will be Nick Ball defending his WBA featherweight title against Sam Goodman on August 16th. Now, for Ball, he is the ring's number 3 featherweight. Goodman, the ring's number 4 boxer at 122. He is moving up for his first world title shot. Sam Goodman was supposed to fight Naoya Inoue. He blew that opportunity twice because of his eye cuts and the injury and all those different things. He could not fight in that fight, leading to Inoue fighting the South Korean fighter back in January. Sam Goodman is a good fighter. Solid fighter. Does he deserve to go up from 122 to 126 and go get a world championship title shot right away? Absolutely not. I like Sam Goodman, but not this fight. And it baffles me. Didn't the same exact thing just happen for Nick Ball when he fought TJ Doheny? And then he fought Ronnie Rios just a little bit before that. Nick Ball is a very exciting fighter. I love Nick Ball. He's a very fun fighter. I love him a lot. But these title defenses are just baffling to me. They're not entertaining. They're not good. And they're just weird matchups that don't need to be made. We don't need him to keep fighting Inoue's guys that Inoue already got done beating up. You're at 126. Go fight guys naturally at 126. Can we get a unification? Can we get a big fight at 126? Why do these guys keep moving up and why do they keep getting away with this? Not a big fan of that, but Nick Ball will be defending his belt as the co-main event. Here is the good fight. The third featured bout on this card is the fight of this card so far. By far the best card, in my opinion, should be the main event. Anthony Kakasi, the former world champion who relinquished his belt but kept his IBO belt and just had a massive performance against Lee Wood. He is going to go out there and fight Raiden Ford in a coin flip. This will be a 50-50 fight in my opinion. High stakes fight. This is going to be incredible. Kakasi is currently ranked number 3 by the ring, while Ray Ford is ranked number 10. Ray Ford is much better than number 10. I think Ray Ford is spectacular, and he will be a future world champion. And you're looking at a fight between 2 of the top 5 guys at the weight class. This is a massive fight to make for 130, where I think it will be the best fight in this card, by far. That is a blockbuster banger, a fight that could possibly even be fight of the year. Kakasi is easily one of the top 4 fighters. I think top 3 is easily something you could go out there and say. He should still be a world champion. He relinquished his belt for financial reasons. Not against him doing that move. I already discussed that. But Kakasi fighting Raymond Ford is a massive fight. I personally thought we were going to get Ray Ford with Sugar Nunez, but this fight's even better. No, it's not for a belt, but the winner will certainly get himself in position to go fight for a world championship again. And we're looking at 2 guys that I firmly do believe are top 5 guys in the weight class. So that's what we have for the August 16th Riyadh season fight card. Breaking news did come out as well, though. This happened, and actually, I'm going to end up with this segment. Last thing I'm going to say, a quick news burst. Dana White has now been confirmed to be the promoter for Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford later this year. This has been flip-flopped time and time again. Dana White's on, Dana White's off. Dana White's on, Dana White's off. But UFC 316 happened this weekend, and they announced that UFC 320, the card for UFC Noche that would have been for UFC Noche, has now been removed as that, has now been pushed out to November. October. Therefore, opening the door that this was now a possibility for Dana White to promote this fight is now been announced. So Dana White will get into the boxing game by promoting Canelo Alvarez, Terence Bud Crawford later this year. That's going to be interesting. I've already discussed that before. Not against it. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes down. Last thing I want to get into on today's show, and this is going to be interesting. I talked last week about a situation that happened with Boxer. And it was a situation that was baffling to me. I thought it was a disgrace. What they did to Adam Azim by making him go out there and fight on a couple of days' notice against Elliot Chavez was an absolute disgrace. Never, ever, ever should have happened. I give my thoughts on how disgusting that was by boxer Ben Shalom. Well, we fast forward to Saturday, and here's what happens. The British Boxing Board of Control has withdrawn permission for Elliot Chavez to face Adam Azim following concerns raised by the Mexican Boxing Commission relating to Chavez's use of a sauna to make weight. That's obviously against the rules. I've always been a little skeptical about that. So you can wear the sauna, as we saw Chris Eubank Jr. doing, but you can't go in a sauna. Very weird rule. Typically, I have great respect for the BBFC. I think they're incredible for what they do. That one rule is very suspicious to me. However, we'll move aside from that. So you're telling me for a boxer, you have debatably your most prized prospect in all your stable. Obviously, him, Ben Whitaker, so on and so forth. He's right up there, debatably the number 1 guy. You were just going to say, you know what? Throw you on the back end of a card, just have you fight on a couple days' notice, and then he's going to get ready for a fight. He agrees to that for some reason, and he's going to go out there and perform this fight for you. And then on a moment's notice, now you're going to say he can't even go out there and fight? What Boxer did to Adam Azim over the past weekend was embarrassing. And I'll say this again. Does Boxer have the potential? Have they done more than I think anyone expected them to do? Yes. But they need to stop making these rookie mistakes and start taking the game seriously because it's getting embarrassing. Absolutely embarrassing. And if you're Adam Azim, I'm not against him moving on from Boxer completely. At this point in his career, what Ben Shalom and Boxer is doing is embarrassing. And they need to get rid of that right now. That relationship can go out the door. Because if Boxer is going to continue to give Adam Azim treat Adam Azim the way they're treating him, it isn't a disgrace to him. And then good news, or not really good news, but interesting news comes out in regards to Boxer. After this, Sky Sports will not renew the Boxer deal. As widely expected, Sky Sports will not be renewing the 4-year exclusive contract with Ben Shalom's Boxer, which will expire on June 30th. Sky's strategy moving forward will see them pick up individual fights from a range of promoters. Not against Sky Sports for doing that. In fact, I think it's 100% makes a lot of sense. The trash that Boxer's been giving has been abysmal. Not good fight cards, treating the top fighters embarrassingly, just not good from top to bottom. Embarrassing. And so for Sky Sports, absolutely this makes sense. Sky Sports is a great platform, a massive platform, but you need to have the right branding to do that. Matchroom worked out well with them, but Matchroom became bigger than Sky Sports. Boxer would have made sense to somebody that's domestically, primarily domestic, and you could have obviously worked with Sky Sports quite well. But you have not held up to the standards of Sky Sports. And now you're in a situation where you don't have a TV deal coming up. Sure, they might pick up a couple of your fights here and there, but if you don't have Sky Sports backing you, who are you going to go with? Because I'm not sure how many of their fight cards are going to be adequate level for DAZN. Now, DAZN might pick them up, but it's going to be for a much cheaper deal. And so if you're a Ben Shalom, you have to be working on constantly to try getting this TV deal done. Because this could be proved to be detrimental for Boxer. They need a good TV deal. They need to be put in position to be able to go get that deal done so they don't fall off the cliff. They need that TV deal done. And right now, with the performance they're doing, the way they're treating the top fighters, it's not looking too sunshine and rainbows for Boxer right now. And as I've said this time and time again, has Ben Shalom and Boxer surpassed expectations for what people thought they would accomplish all the way back in the time? Yes. But are they still somehow making foolish rookie mistakes this far into their careers? Yes. And those foolish mistakes are going to cost them big time. If they don't make big changes quickly, they're going to have themselves in a massive pickle and a blunder that's going to screw them over going forward. And I already say this, if you're Adam Azim, it's time to move on. And other guys in Boxer would not shock me if they're going to be moving on from the promotional company in the near future. So big changes are needed with Ben Shalom and Boxer. That's what I've got for you guys in store for today's show. I appreciate each and every single one of you guys for tuning in. As I said, the Joe Ward interview, that will be happening in the near future. Hopefully we'll have that on by tomorrow or next week, but I'll keep you guys posted on that one. I thank you guys all for tuning in today's show. May God bless you guys all. I hope you guys have a great rest of you guys Monday. I will see you guys tomorrow at 12 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. May God bless you guys all. I'll see you guys tomorrow. SchuZ out.